The massive crystalline dome stretched above like a frozen ocean of light, its transparent walls reaching so high they seemed to touch the stars themselves. Commander Elena Voss stood alone in the center of the judgment circle, her hands clasped behind her back as 3,000 alien eyes focused on her with predatory intensity. The Galactic Council chamber was the largest structure humanity had ever witnessed, capable of holding representatives from every known species in the galaxy. The silence was absolute, broken only by the soft hum of translation matrices working overtime to process the thousands of different languages and communication methods present. Elena could feel the weight of their stare, the collective hostility of civilizations that spanned millions of years of galactic history. To them, humanity was nothing more than a primitive upstart species that had somehow stumbled into interstellar politics. They were about to learn how wrong they were. High Chancellor Mordak of the Velian hegemony leaned forward on his massive throne, his 6 arms spreading in a gesture of absolute authority that had intimidated species for millennia. His segmented jaw clicked as he spoke, each word carefully translated and amplified throughout the vast chamber. Humans of Terra. His voice boomed across the crystalline expanse. You stand accused of systematic violation of 17 galactic accords, unlawful colonization of protected systems, and deliberate interference with established trade routes that have maintained peace for thousands of years. Elena listened patiently as the charges were read. Around the chamber she could see representatives from hundreds of species. The crystalline beings of the Andorian collective glowed with barely contained energy. The insectoid hive queens clicked their mandibles in anticipation. Ancient mechanical entities that had existed since before most organic species achieved consciousness hummed with electronic satisfaction. These are serious crimes against galactic order, Chancellor Mordak continued, his compound eyes reflecting the chamber's bioluminescent patterns. Crimes that have historically resulted in complete planetary quarantine or worse. How do you answer these charges? The chamber held its breath. For 3 standard cycles, humanity had remained silent since their arrival, refusing to speak or defend themselves. Many species had interpreted this as fear or acceptance of guilt. The more aggressive civilizations had already begun discussing how to divide human territory among themselves. Elena's lips curved into a smile that never reached her eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice carried clearly through the vast space without any artificial amplification, a feat that should have been impossible in a chamber designed to muffle sound. Your Honor, she said, her tone respectful but carrying an undertone that made several representatives shift uncomfortably. Before I address your charges, I believe there's something the Council should know about humanity that might change the entire context of this proceeding. Chancellor Mordak's breathing grew heavier, his secondary arms beginning to twitch in what Elena recognized as barely controlled agitation. Speak quickly, human. The Council's patience grows thin, and there are many species eager to claim your worlds. Elena reached into her uniform pocket and withdrew a small device no larger than a standard galactic credit chip. She held it up for all to see, the simple appearance belying its true capabilities. This is a quantum resonance scanner, she announced. Standard Earth technology for the past 50 years. Nothing impressive by galactic standards, you might think. But I've been using it since I entered this chamber to analyze the quantum signatures of every species present. A murmur rippled through the assembly like water disturbed by a thrown stone. Several representatives leaned forward, confused by the seemingly random introduction of human technology. The more scientifically advanced species began to show signs of concern. The interesting thing about quantum signatures, Elena continued, beginning to pace slowly around the judgment circle, her footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet, is that they're unique to each reality framework. Each dimension, if you prefer more primitive terminology. She paused directly in front of the Chancellor's throne, her scanner beginning to emit a soft blue glow that cast strange shadows across her face. My little device has made a fascinating discovery about this gathering. 97% of the species in this chamber are not native to this dimension. You're refugees, exiles, survivors who fled here from somewhere else. The chamber erupted into chaos, angry chittering, roars of denial, and the sound of representatives rising from their seats filled the air with a cacophony that the translation system struggled to process. But Elena's voice somehow cut through the noise with supernatural clarity. The question that should concern this council, she said, stopping directly in front of Chancellor Mordak's throne. What were you all running from that was so terrible it forced 3,000 species to flee to a parallel reality? The silence that followed was absolute. Every eye in the chamber was fixed on the lone human who had just revealed she knew their greatest secret, the one that had bound their alliance together for millennia. And more importantly, Elena continued, her smile becoming predatory, why did you think hiding in our dimension would keep you safe? Chancellor Mordak's compound eyes had gone completely still, a defensive posture his species hadn't displayed in over 2,000 years. When he spoke, his voice had lost all its previous authority. Impossible. Humans are a primitive species. You've barely achieved interstellar capability. Elena's laughter echoed through the chamber, not the desperate sound of a cornered animal, but the confident amusement of a predator finally revealing its true nature. Primitive? She gestured to the scanner in her hand, which was now glowing with an ominous red light. This device isn't just reading quantum signatures, Chancellor. It's mapping dimensional breach points, every single one you've used to escape your original reality over the past 12,000 years. She began walking again, but this time her path took her closer to the observation galleries where minor species representatives sat in growing terror. Tell me, honored delegates, Elena said, her voice carrying easily to every corner of the vast space. When your ancestors first detected the quantum anomalies that led you to this dimension, did any of you wonder what might have caused such perfectly controlled breaches, such precisely targeted dimensional tiers? Vice-Chancellor Thondar of the Crystalline Dominion rose from his seat, his translucent form shimmering with barely controlled energy. You speak in riddles, human. What are you implying? Elena stopped directly beneath his gallery, looking up at the being who commanded the loyalty of 1 billion crystal worlds. I'm not implying anything, she replied, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to every being present. I'm stating a fact. Those dimensional breaches you used to escape to this reality, we created them. The chamber erupted again, but this time the chaos was different. Where before there had been outrage and denial, now there was something else entirely. The first stirrings of genuine, primal fear. Elena raised her voice above the tumult, and her words fell on the assembly like stones into still water. Humanity has been studying dimensional theory for longer than your recorded histories suggest. We've been watching, learning, cataloging every species that crossed into our reality. Every single one. She turned back to face Chancellor Mordak directly, her scanner now pulsing with light that seemed to bend space around it. The question that should concern this council isn't whether humanity has violated your galactic accords. The question is, why do you think we allowed you to establish them in the first place? The red glow from Elena's scanner cast dancing shadows across the frozen faces of the Galactic Council. Chancellor Mordak's 6 arms had gone completely still, locked in a defensive posture his species hadn't displayed in over 2 millennia. The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Impossible, whispered Ambassador Kethra of the Spiral Collective, her voice barely audible through her species' complex vocal apparatus. Humans are a primitive species. You've barely achieved interstellar capability. Elena's laughter echoed through the chamber, not the desperate sound of a cornered animal, but the confident amusement of a predator finally revealing its true nature. Primitive? She gestured to the scanner in her hand, its crimson light now pulsing in rhythm with something that seemed to resonate through the very fabric of space. This device isn't just reading quantum signatures. It's mapping dimensional breach points, every single one you've used to escape your original reality over the past 12,000 years. She began walking again, but this time her path took her closer to the observation galleries where the minor species representatives sat. Each step seemed calculated, purposeful, like a hunter circling wounded prey. Tell me, honored delegates, Elena continued, her voice carrying easily to every corner of the vast chamber. When your ancestors first detected the quantum anomalies that led you to this dimension, did any of you wonder what might have caused such perfectly controlled breaches? Such precisely targeted dimensional tiers? Vice-Chancellor Thondar of the Crystalline Dominion rose from his seat, his translucent form shimmering with agitation that sent prismatic light dancing across the chamber walls. You speak in riddles, human. What are you implying? Elena stopped directly beneath his gallery, looking up at the being who commanded the loyalty of 1 billion crystal worlds. When she smiled, it held no warmth whatsoever. I'm not implying anything, she replied, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to every being present. I'm stating a fact. Those dimensional breaches? We created them. The chamber erupted in chaos unlike anything in galactic history. Representatives were shouting, demanding explanations, making threats. But Elena's voice cut through it all with supernatural clarity. Humanity has been studying dimensional theory for longer than your recorded history suggests. We've been watching, learning, cataloging every species that crossed into our reality. Every single one. She pressed a control on her scanner, and suddenly the chamber was filled with holographic displays. Star charts, dimensional maps, tactical analyses floated in the air around them. But these weren't human documents. They were records from dozens of different species, all showing the same thing: carefully orchestrated events that had shaped galactic civilization for thousands of years. The Proxima conflict that established the first trade routes, Elena said, pointing to one display that showed battle formations and casualty reports. The Andorian plague that forced the creation of the Medical Council. The Vegan system collapse that led to the resource allocation accords. Each event she mentioned sent ripples of recognition through specific delegations. Representatives began to realize that conflicts and disasters they had attributed to random chance or natural causes had been far more coordinated than anyone had suspected. All carefully planned, Elena continued, her voice growing colder with each word. All designed to give you the illusion of order while we studied you. While we learned your weaknesses, your fears, your capabilities. Ambassador Velnash of the Hive World stood on her thousands of tiny legs, her compound voice trembling with something that might have been terror. But why? What could you possibly want from us? Elena's expression grew darker, more serious. The predatory smile faded, replaced by something that looked almost like pity. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that seemed to press down on every being present, because we needed to know if any of you were worth saving when they finally arrive. A chill ran through the chamber as every representative processed her words. The implications were staggering. Chancellor Mordak found his voice first, though it came out as barely a whisper. They? Who is they? Elena looked up at the crystalline dome above them, as if she could see through it to the stars beyond. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of cosmic dread. The ones you've all been running from. The ones who destroyed your original reality so completely that fleeing to a parallel dimension seemed like a reasonable option. She paused, letting the magnitude of her words sink into the collective consciousness of 3,000 civilizations. They called themselves the Devourers, and they've been following your quantum trail for the past 3,000 years. The scanner in her hand pulsed brighter, and new holographic displays appeared. These showed something that made several representatives cry out in shock. Massive shapes moving through space between dimensions, vessels so large they defied comprehension. They consume realities, Elena explained, her voice now clinical and detached. Not just planets or solar systems. Entire dimensional frameworks. 17 realities have fallen to them so far, each one completely stripped of consciousness and left as empty void. Representative Morgeth of the Iron Clans. A being so ancient his mechanical augmentations predated most species' written history, spoke for the first time in cycles. Then why haven't they attacked? Why wait? Elena's smile returned, but this time it held something that spoke of agreements made in the dark between worlds, of decisions that would reshape the galaxy, because they made us an offer. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Elena could see that even the hardiest species were beginning to show signs of what humans would recognize as panic. They call it the winnowing protocol, she continued. They're not interested in destroying everything anymore. After 17 realities, even cosmic entities get tired of genocide. Instead, they want to curate. She touched her scanner again and new displays appeared. Lists, categories, assessments. Every species in the chamber could see their own designation floating in the holographic space above them. They're willing to allow certain species to continue existing. The criteria are complex, but it essentially comes down to 3 factors: technological contribution, cultural uniqueness, and evolutionary potential. Vice-Chancellor Thondar's crystalline form was now pulsing with stress fractures that sent sharp fragments of light across the chamber floor. And humanity? What is your designation? Elena's smile became predatory again, holding secrets that had been kept for millennia. Humanity has been designated as the assessors. We're the ones who determine which species meet the criteria for preservation. The chamber exploded into chaos. Representatives were shouting, demanding explanations, making threats, pleading for mercy. But Elena's voice cut through it all with supernatural clarity. "The Devourers will arrive in 37 standard days," she announced. "When they do, they will expect a complete report on every species in this dimension. Those that meet the criteria will be relocated to a preserved reality. Those that don't will be consumed along with everything else in this dimensional framework." She gestured to the displays around them, where species assessments flickered like Judgment Day tallies. "But here's the interesting part," Elena continued, raising her voice above the growing pandemonium. "The assessment isn't just based on your species' capabilities. It's also based on your cooperation with the process." Chancellor Mordak had regained some composure, though his secondary arms were still twitching uncontrollably. "What exactly are you proposing, human?" Elena's expression grew deadly serious. "I'm not proposing anything, Chancellor. I'm informing you of the new reality." The silence in the chamber stretched like a blade held at the throat of the galaxy. Elena could feel the weight of 3,000 civilizations' worth of terror pressing down on the assembled representatives. But she was far from finished with her revelations. Chancellor Mordak's voice came out strangled, his sophisticated translation matrix struggling to convey the full depth of his species' capacity for fear. You've been in contact with the Devourers?" Elena shook her head slowly, and when she smiled, it held the cold certainty of someone who had stared into the abyss and made it blink first. "Contact?" she said. "Chancellor, we are in contact with them. We have been for the past 800 years. She touched another control on her scanner, and the holographic displays shifted dramatically. Now they showed something that made several representatives cry out in shock. Detailed schematics of Devourer vessels, tactical assessments of their weapons systems, and what appeared to be diplomatic correspondence written in languages that predated galactic civilization. "You see," Elena continued, beginning to pace around the judgment circle again, "when an entity that has consumed 17 different realities sends you a message saying, 'We're coming to finish what we started,' you have two choices. You can run and hide like the rest of the galaxy did, or you can pick up the quantum comm and have a conversation." Ambassador Kethra's voice had risen to a near shriek, her elegant vocal apparatus distorting the words with terror. "You've doomed us all. You've told them where we are." Elena's laughter was cold, clinical, the sound of someone who had calculated odds that would drive lesser minds to madness. "They already knew where you were. They've known for millennia. Did you really think that beings capable of tracking dimensional signatures across reality barriers would lose your trail because you changed zip codes?" She gestured to the assembled delegates with something approaching contempt. "Every one of your species left quantum breadcrumbs when you fled. Energy signatures, dimensional distortions, reality echoes. The Devourers have been following them like a roadmap straight to our dimension." Representative Morgoth of the Iron Clans, a being so ancient his mechanical augmentations predated most species' written history, spoke with the weight of eons behind his words. "Then why haven't they attacked? Why wait?" Elena stopped her pacing and turned to face the ancient machine being directly. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of negotiations conducted in the dark between stars. "Because they made us an offer." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop to near absolute zero. Elena could see that even the hardiest species were beginning to show signs of what humans would recognize as existential panic. "They call it the winnowing protocol," she continued, her voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate through the chamber's crystalline structure. "They're not interested in destroying everything anymore. After 17 realities, even cosmic entities get tired of genocide. Instead, they want to curate." She touched her scanner again, and new displays appeared around them. Lists, categories, assessments floated in the air like Judgment Day tablets. Every species in the chamber could see their own designation hovering in the holographic space. "They're willing to allow certain species to continue existing," Elena explained. "The criteria are complex, but it essentially comes down to 3 factors: technological contribution, cultural uniqueness, and evolutionary potential." Vice-Chancellor Thondar's crystalline form was now pulsing with stress fractures that sent razor-sharp fragments of light dancing across the chamber walls. "And humanity? What is your designation in this cosmic catalog?" Elena's smile became something that spoke of agreements made in the spaces between realities, of decisions that would reshape the fundamental nature of existence itself. Humanity has been designated as the assessors, she said. We're the ones who determine which species meet the criteria for preservation. The chamber erupted into chaos unlike anything in galactic history. Representatives were screaming in languages that predated the formation of stars, demanding explanations, making threats that spanned dimensional barriers, pleading for mercy in voices that had never before known fear. But Elena's voice somehow cut through it all, carrying with supernatural clarity across the vast crystalline dome. The Devourers will arrive in 37 standard days, she announced. When they do, they will expect a complete report on every species in this dimension. Those that meet the criteria will be relocated to a preserved reality. Those that don't will be consumed along with everything else in this dimensional framework. She gestured to the floating displays where species assessments flickered like cosmic scorecards. But here's the part that should truly concern you, Elena continued, her voice rising above the growing pandemonium. The assessment isn't just based on your species' inherent capabilities. It's also based on your cooperation with the evaluation process. Chancellor Mordak had regained some composure, though his secondary arms continued their uncontrollable twitching. What exactly are you demanding of us, human? Elena's expression grew deadly serious, and when she spoke, her words carried the finality of cosmic law. I'm not demanding anything. I'm informing you of the new reality. But I will say this. The species that have been most cooperative with our assessment protocols have fared significantly better in their preliminary evaluations. She gestured to her scanner, which now displayed a complex matrix of species ratings and classifications that shifted and changed as she spoke. The Spiral Collective, for example, has shown remarkable adaptability and technological innovation. The Iron Clans have demonstrated exceptional resilience and problem-solving capabilities. The Crystalline Dominion has unique energy manipulation abilities that could prove valuable in the preserved reality. Each species she mentioned showed visible relief, but Elena's next words cut through their hope like a dimensional blade. Of course, those assessments were made before today's revelations about galactic law violations and humanity's actual status in this dimension. Current events may require significant revisions to our evaluations. The fear was now palpable, a living thing that filled the chamber like toxic atmosphere. But Elena wasn't finished with her revelations. She had saved the most terrifying for last. There is one other thing you should know, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the vast space. The Devourers aren't just coming to assess you. They're coming because they've detected something in this dimension that they've never encountered before, something that has them genuinely concerned. She looked up at the crystalline dome above them, as if she could see beyond the stars to something vast and terrible approaching through the dark, between realities. They want to know why humanity, a species that should have been barely capable of fire when they first detected this dimension, has quantum technology that rivals their own. The implication hit the chamber like a shockwave. Every representative suddenly understood that humanity's role in this cosmic drama was far more complex than they had imagined. Elena's scanner pulsed once more, and the final display appeared above them. It showed the approaching Devourer fleet, massive beyond comprehension, moving through space between dimensions with purpose that had been building for millennia. 37 days, Elena repeated. Use them wisely. The weight of Elena's words hung in the air like a cosmic death sentence, but as the representatives processed her revelation about humanity's impossible quantum technology, a new kind of silence fell over the chamber. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of minds frantically working to understand implications that seemed to stretch beyond the boundaries of known reality. It was Representative Morgath who spoke first, his mechanical voice cutting through the tension with the authority of someone who had witnessed the rise and fall of entire galactic civilizations. You're not human, are you? Elena turned to face the Iron Clan's delegate, and for the first time since entering the chamber, her expression showed something approaching genuine respect. Very astute, Representative. What gave it away? Morgath's optical sensors focused intently on her, processing data at speeds that would have burned out organic brains. The quantum technology. I've been alive for 47,000 years. I've seen species rise and fall, watched civilizations that lasted eons crumble to dust when they stopped adapting. No species develops quantum mastery in the time frame humanity claims to have existed. Elena nodded slowly, and when she smiled, it held the weight of secrets that spanned realities. The Iron Clans always were the most observant. It's one of the reasons you'll definitely be preserved. She began walking again, but this time her movements seemed different. Less human, more something else entirely. Something that moved through space as if the normal rules of physics were merely suggestions. You're correct, of course. What you call humanity isn't exactly what we appear to be, but we're not entirely something else either. She paused, considering her words with the care of someone who had learned that truth could be more dangerous than any weapon. We're what happens when two realities collide and something entirely new emerges from the intersection. Chancellor Mordak's breathing had stabilized, but his compound eyes remained fixed on Elena, with an intensity that suggested he was beginning to understand the true scope of what they were dealing with. The original humans, Elena continued, her voice taking on harmonics that seemed to resonate through dimensions, were indeed a primitive species barely capable of interstellar travel when we arrived. But they had something unique, something we'd never encountered in our travels across 17 different realities. She stopped in front of a section of the chamber wall where the bioluminescent veins pulsed more brightly than elsewhere. When she placed her hand against the crystalline surface, the patterns immediately began to change, shifting into configurations that hurt to look at directly. They had the ability to adapt not just to new environments, but to new forms of existence entirely. When we merged with them, we didn't replace their consciousness or absorb their identity. We became something altogether different, something that retained their creativity and adaptability while gaining our knowledge and power. The chamber wall under her touch began to display images that defied comprehension, glimpses of realities where the laws of physics operated differently, where consciousness itself had different properties, where existence meant something entirely alien to galactic understanding. Ambassador Velnash of the Hive World spoke up, her compound voice trembling with something beyond mere fear. Who are you? What were you before the merger? Elena's reflection in the chamber wall seemed to flicker for a moment, showing something that was definitely not human, before returning to its familiar appearance. When she turned back to face the assembly, her eyes held depths that spoke of unimaginable experiences. We were refugees too, in a way, she said. We're what remains of the first reality the Devourers consumed. Not a species exactly, but the collective consciousness of an entire universe in its final moments. The revelation hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several representatives actually staggered under the weight of understanding what they were truly dealing with. They weren't just facing enhanced humans or even an advanced alien species. They were confronting the concentrated essence of a dead universe. A dying universe, Elena continued, her voice now carrying echoes of cosmic dissolution, has certain capabilities when it comes to quantum manipulation. When reality itself is collapsing, consciousness learns to exist in ways that transcend normal physical laws. When we found this dimension and discovered humanity, we saw an opportunity for something unprecedented. She turned away from the wall, and when she faced the assembly again, her appearance had subtly shifted. She still looked human, but there was something in her bearing now that spoke of vast ages and experiences that spanned the death of worlds. The Devourers consume realities by feeding on the collective consciousness of their inhabitants. They grow stronger with each universe they destroy, adding the knowledge and experience of entire civilizations to their cosmic awareness. But we realized something they hadn't considered. Vice-Chancellor Thondar's crystalline form was completely still now, his usual luminescent patterns dimmed to almost nothing. You discovered a way to resist them. Elena shook her head. Not resist. We discovered something far more significant. If you could create a hybrid consciousness, one that existed partially outside normal reality, you might be able to do something the Devourers had never encountered before. She paused, and when she continued, her words carried the weight of cosmic revolution. You might be able to consume them. The chamber erupted in chaos unlike anything in galactic history. This wasn't fear or outrage anymore. This was the sound of 3,000 civilizations trying to process the concept that the cosmic entity they'd been fleeing for millennia might itself become prey. Elena raised her hand, and the noise died instantly. The gesture hadn't been loud or dramatic, but something about it compelled absolute silence across dimensional barriers. The assessment protocol isn't just about determining which species the Devourers will preserve, she explained. It's about determining which species have the quantum resilience necessary to survive what's coming next. She activated her scanner one final time, but now instead of displaying species assessments, it showed a three-dimensional map of local space with complex trajectory calculations and energy readings that defied conventional physics. When the Devourers arrive in 37 days, they'll be expecting to find a dimension full of scattered refugee species and primitive humans. Instead, they're going to encounter something that has never existed before. A hybrid reality with quantum characteristics they can't process or consume. Chancellor Mordak found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "What do you need from us?" Elena's smile returned, but this time it held something approaching warmth instead of predatory satisfaction. "What we've always needed: willing cooperation. The quantum integration process requires the voluntary participation of all species involved. We can't force the merger. It has to be chosen freely." She gestured to the displays around them, where complex integration protocols flickered like cosmic blueprints. Every species that agrees to join the hybrid reality will retain their individual consciousness, while gaining access to quantum capabilities that will allow them to exist outside normal space-time. Those that refuse will face the Devourers using conventional reality, which has never worked before. Representative Morgeth's mechanical voice carried new harmonics. "This isn't a temporary alliance or strategic partnership. You're proposing permanent evolution." "Exactly," Elena nodded. "Your species will become part of something larger, something that has never existed before. You'll still be yourselves, but you'll also be part of us. Part of something that can not only survive an encounter with cosmic predators, but transform them." The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of the most important decision in galactic history. But Elena had one final revelation to share. "There's something else you should know," she said, her voice carrying urgent harmonics. "The Devourers aren't coming alone. They've learned from their encounters with us, and they're bringing something new, something they call reality anchors. Weapons designed specifically to prevent quantum integration and lock consciousness into a single-dimensional framework." She looked around the chamber, meeting the gaze of every representative she could see. "We have 37 days to complete the most complex quantum integration in the history of any reality. 37 days to transform 3,000 species and an entire dimensional framework into something capable of consuming cosmic predators." Elena paused, letting the magnitude of what she was proposing settle into their collective consciousness. "The choice is yours. Evolution or extinction, but choose quickly. Time is running out for everything." The vote was unlike anything in galactic history. No speeches, no debates, no political maneuvering that had characterized council sessions for millennia. Each species simply had to decide between two futures: evolution into something unprecedented, or facing cosmic annihilation with conventional reality. The first to respond was Representative Morgeth of the Iron Clans. His mechanical form rose from its seat with a sound like grinding metal that had echoed through 47,000 years of galactic history. When he spoke, there was something almost resembling emotion in his ancient voice. "I have witnessed the rise and fall of 17 galactic civilizations," he said, his optical sensors scanning the chamber with the weight of accumulated ages. "I have seen species achieve what they thought was godhood only to crumble to dust when they stopped adapting to new realities. The Iron Clans choose evolution." A pulse of energy emanated from Elena's scanner as Morgeth made his choice, and suddenly the air around the Iron Clan's delegation began to shimmer with quantum distortions. The representatives weren't changing physically, but something fundamental about their existence was shifting into configurations that had never existed before. One by one, other species began to announce their decisions. The Spiral Collective chose integration after a brief internal consultation that sounded like music played on instruments of pure thought. The Crystalline Dominion voted for evolution, their translucent forms beginning to pulse with new patterns of light. The Hive Worlds, after a rapid internal discussion that resembled a swarm of insects debating philosophy, chose to join the hybrid reality. But not all decisions came easily. Chancellor Mordak sat in silence for long minutes, his 6 arms moving in complex patterns that Elena recognized as a traditional Velian meditation ritual used for the most critical decisions in their species' history. When he finally spoke, His voice carried the weight of speaking for one of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful civilizations. The Velian hegemony has ruled through strength for 12,000 years, he said slowly, each word carefully chosen. We have never submitted to any authority, never compromised our sovereignty, never bowed to any power in this galaxy. He paused, his compound eyes reflecting the chamber's shifting patterns of light. But we have also never encountered an opportunity to transcend the fundamental limitations of physical existence itself. The Chancellor rose from his massive throne, his imposing form casting shadows that seemed to bend reality around them. The Velian hegemony chooses evolution, but we do so as equals in this new reality, not as subjects or subordinates. Elena's smile was genuinely pleased, carrying warmth that had been absent during her earlier revelations. Equality is the foundation of what we're building, Chancellor. No species will be subservient to any other in the hybrid reality. We're creating something where individual identity strengthens the whole. As more species voted for integration, the chamber itself began to transform in ways that defied conventional physics. The crystalline wall started to pulse with new patterns of energy that extended into dimensions the assembled beings had never perceived before. The space seemed to become larger and more complex, as if additional realities were being folded into the existing structure. But there were holdouts. Ambassador Kethra of a rival Spiral Collective faction stood with rigid determination and declared, "We will not surrender our independence to become part of some cosmic experiment, no matter how desperate our situation becomes." Several smaller species echoed her sentiment, choosing to face the devourers rather than submit to transformation they couldn't fully understand. Elena nodded respectfully to each species that chose to remain separate, her expression showing genuine regret rather than condemnation. "Your decision is honored and respected. Transport ships are already being prepared to take you to the Outer Rim systems. You'll have time to establish whatever defenses you think might be effective against the devourers." As the voting continued, Elena activated additional functions in her scanner, and holographic displays began showing the integration process in real time. Species that had voted for evolution were beginning to exist on multiple quantum levels simultaneously, their consciousness expanding beyond the normal limitations of space and time, while retaining their individual identity. "The process is accelerating beyond our initial projections," Elena announced, her voice carrying new harmonics as the integration affected even her hybrid nature. "We now have approximately 18 hours to complete the quantum merger before the devourers arrive." 18 hours. Vice-Chancellor Thondar's crystalline form flickered with alarm that sent prismatic light dancing across the transforming chamber. "You said 37 days. Elena's expression grew grim, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of cosmic urgency. "The reality anchors I mentioned aren't just weapons designed to prevent quantum integration. They're also early warning systems that monitor dimensional stability across vast distances. The devourers detected our quantum activity the moment we began the integration process. They're accelerating their arrival to prevent us from completing the transformation." Panic began to spread through the chamber like wildfire, but Elena raised her hand for silence. When she spoke, her voice somehow carried calm certainty that penetrated the growing fear. "This changes nothing about the fundamental process, only the timeline we're working with. Those who have chosen integration will complete it successfully. Those who have chosen independence have already been transported to defensive positions in the outer systems, where they can make their stand." As she spoke, the chamber around them continued its impossible transformation. What had once been a simple crystalline dome was now a complex multidimensional space that seemed to exist in several realities simultaneously. The representatives who had chosen integration were beginning to perceive things that had been invisible before. Quantum currents that connected all consciousness, dimensional boundaries that could be crossed at will, the underlying structure of reality itself. "I can see them," whispered Ambassador Velnash, her compound voice filled with wonder that transcended her species' usual pragmatic nature. "I can see the spaces between the stars, the connections between thoughts, the patterns that bind all consciousness together into something greater than the sum of its parts." Elena nodded, her own transformation becoming more apparent as the integration progressed. "That's the beginning of your new existence. You're starting to perceive reality the way we do, not as a single fixed framework with immutable laws, but as an infinite web of possibilities that consciousness can reshape through will and understanding. Suddenly, alarms began to sound throughout the chamber, their harmonics penetrating dimensions that conventional technology couldn't reach. Elena checked her scanner and her expression became deadly serious. "They're here," she announced. 6 hours early, and moving faster than even our revised calculations predicted. The chamber's walls became completely transparent, and the assembled beings could see space around them with clarity that transcended normal vision. In the distance, massive shapes were emerging from dimensional tiers that split reality like wounds. Vessels so large they defied comprehension, their surfaces covered in geometric patterns that caused physical pain to look at directly. "The Devourer fleet," Elena said, her voice now carrying harmonics that resonated across multiple realities. 47 ships, each one capable of consuming the consciousness of an entire solar system and adding it to their collective awareness. But as the fleet approached with inexorable purpose, something unexpected happened. The integrated species in the chamber could suddenly feel something vast and alien touching their expanded consciousness. A presence so immense and hungry that it seemed to fill the spaces between galaxies like a cosmic predator that had never known defeat. "We are the Devourers." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, speaking directly to their minds in ways that bypassed all conventional communication. "We have come to reclaim the consciousness that fled from us across dimensional barriers. Surrender the refugees, and we will consider allowing your hybrid experiment to continue as a curiosity." Elena stood in the center of the chamber, but now she was clearly visible on multiple dimensional levels simultaneously, her form extending into realities that the assembled beings were only beginning to perceive. When she responded, her voice carried the accumulated power of an entire dead universe. "We are no longer what we were when you last encountered us," she replied, her words resonating across dimensions. "We are not the refugees you pursued across realities. We are not the primitive humans you expected to find in this dimension. We are something entirely new, something that exists beyond your ability to consume or comprehend." The presence of the Devourers pressed against their collective consciousness like a crushing weight that had destroyed 17 realities. But the integrated species found they could not only resist it but push back with force that surprised even Elena. "Impossible." The Devourer voice carried notes of confusion and, for the first time in their cosmic existence, genuine uncertainty. "Consciousness cannot exist outside the quantum frameworks we control. We have consumed every form of awareness that has ever evolved."